So let's jump right away into the panel discussion. The panel discussion is split into 4 sections. One is a section on technological disruption and actuaries. The second is partnering by the actuarial profession in India's journey to Viksit Bharat. Third section is actuaries and ethics. And to me, fourth section is the most interesting section because that talks about actuaries yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And when we're talking about yesterday, we're talking about 3 decades back, that is sometime in 1990s, today, and how the profession is likely to look like 3 decades from now. That is 2056 or 2057. And perhaps more importantly for us, in between in 2047, when we aspire to become a Viksit or developed nation. So we jump into the discussion. Yeah, thank you. So on the first session, first topic, the technological disruptions and actuaries. My first question is to obviously the past president of the International Actuarial Association. And as I said that I'm doubly privileged to have moderated this session last year as well. So in the last presidential roundtable, Bozenna, we talked about the new skills that the actuaries must possess in order to remain relevant at a time when technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning are disrupting all the industries in an unimaginable way. During times of such uncertainties, what do you think is the role of AI-enabled actuarial mindset? And what do you think is the key difference between this AI-enabled actuarial mindset and the artificial intelligence skills that the actuaries must possess? And if you want to add, how can we effectively incorporate artificial intelligence into our workflows?
Thank you, Anurag. Now, I think the first thing is that we've just all got to recognize is that AI is just a tool. And when I think about how we use AI, I really see it in 2 different ways. Firstly, we can make our existing processes more efficient. So that could be in your coding, you could be doing in your underwriting. When you look at the underwriting processes, you can automatically upload all the questions and make that more efficient. You could be using it to help you with your emails and writing reports and things like that. So that's just making already what we do easier and quicker. The second area we can really use AI is in reimagining processes. So actually sitting back and saying, what's the question we're trying to answer? And if you're saying, this is what we want to go, I don't have to do those 10 steps that I used to do. I could just do it a totally different way and using AI to help us leapfrog that process and just reimagine the way we do things. And I think that's really where the actuarial mindset comes in, because we are skilled at thinking about what is the end result, what is the actual question that we're trying to answer, and focusing on that. And then you don't have to just replicate the many steps in the old process. You can do things a totally new way.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I mean, would you like to elaborate a little bit about the actuarial mindset? Or maybe I can send that question to Paul. How do you think the actuarial mindset is different from the skills that an actuary needs to possess?
I think one of the key skills is, it's a skill which we've always needed to have, which is the skill to learn, to keep learning. Because we know whatever new techniques, opportunities, tools are coming around, in 5 years there'll be different ones. Whatever we teach people in the exams over the next few years will be redundant in 10 years. So they need to make sure that we're teaching people to learn as well as teaching people skills. And that's really crucial. Because what we're seeing in terms of the use of AI in the workplace isn't that different from what we've always seen. I mean, when we had the availability of pocket calculators rather than slide rules, it meant we could work more efficiently. When we moved from calculators to computers, we could do more. When we moved to being able to do full economic scenario generator runs on our mobile phones, we can do more. And AI, to an extent, in terms of processes, is an extension of that. And that means that we can do more, we can do things in different ways, but we just need to make sure we're able to learn how to do that. But there's also the other side of AI as well, which is is complicated models, which somebody needs to understand. Somebody needs to explain them to people who don't understand complicated models, and there needs to be professional oversight. And that's another really interesting aspect of AI, and a really interesting opportunity for actuaries in AI, because understanding and explaining complicated models with professional oversight, I mean, that's a lot of what actuaries do. So recognizing that it can change the way we do stuff, but it also opens up a whole range of opportunities for actuaries to get involved and add value, I think is really important.
Wonderful. So the three takeaways that I see from this discussion, one is that, these are new skills, and I mean, if I can think quickly of, like, if you have to go from ground zero to floor one, you used to ride maybe 20 steps. Today you can perhaps leapfrog with the help of artificial intelligence, and you don't have to climb those 20 steps. That's what AI could potentially achieve, and if you have to drop the parallels. Second is you have to mindset to continuously keep learning, because it's changing very, very fast. What is relevant today will not remain relevant today, maybe in 6 months or 1 year. And third thing that Paul actually brought out is the complicated models where, and that's a very interesting topic. We'll talk about it a little later in the day, because we as actuaries need to understand what's happening in those models, because we become responsible for explaining what's happening and how the results have come about. But I think Preeti, would you like to add some perspective to this?
Hello? Are you able to hear me at the back?
I think you're audible, yeah.
Yeah, because I think the audio, there was some problem. Are you able to hear me at the back? Yes, thank you. Okay, thanks, Anurag, for setting the context. I will give you my perspective of AI and what I have read about it and what I don't know about it also. That for me, AI is not a technology. It's not a technology layer that we are talking about over and above what is already existing. It is actually a business dimension. And for us, I think it is important for us to understand that it's yet not another tool that we started using, augmenting what we are doing, to make it faster. I think we need to understand that it's going to bring about a huge, huge paradigm shift to everything that's happening around the world. And I think many things will change as a result of AI. Jobs will change. The mental alignment will also change. And we would really need to go back to first principles thinking without tools. I think that is going to be very, very key for us. And of course, there'll be a huge, huge change management for both within ourselves and within the organizations in which we operate. And I love acronyms, and I just came across a good acronym which I thought I will share with the audience over here, which is called AI ERA, that is AIERA. And what it stands for is A says that you go beyond traditional analysis, you get into more predictive analysis, you will have a lot of other aspects that, people talk of quantum computing and all as a result of, using AI. I stands for insight and interpretation. So these are the skills that I'm talking about which need to change for us, and the mindset that needs to change. E is ethics, governance and responsibility, which becomes way, way greater when we are talking about AI. R is redefinition of risk. Redefinition of risk is you talk of model risk, data risk, cyber risk, and enterprise risk. And A stands for reassessment of all these risks that we are talking about. So for me, in a nutshell, these are the kind of skills that we will have to, maybe some of it we have forgotten because of what we are doing right now. We will have to brush it up and, rekindle those kind of things again. Yeah, so that's my response.
Very interesting. That is AIERN, right? Wonderful. Yeah. Oh, wow. Great. Thank you very much, Preeti, for bringing that perspective.
Can I add?
Yeah, Frank.
Yeah. So I really like what Bozenna said about making things more efficient, and I also like what Paul said about learning. And you can kind of do both, because AI is a great equalizer. If you don't know how to code now, it's so much easier to learn how to code with AI than without. You can ask it questions and learn how to make your workflow more efficient by picking up skills, tools, and other things that you may not have had access to before. So things are easier. But I also want to say some of the techniques are quite impressive. So one of the problems I had to deal with at Uber is account takeovers. So what will happen is a fraudster will come and they will get the earner's login information. They'll log in as the earner. They'll change the bank account and they'll withdraw all of the earnings. It's just completely awful. So we had to find a way to fight against this. We decided that if we had a lexicographical model, we just said every single event gets a letter, right? You log on, you change your phone number, you change your email, you change your password, you change your bank account. At this point, we know what the story is going to be, right? You know what the next letter is. Turns out when you build that kind of model, it's actually a lot of data munging. But these days, you just need embeddings. Because we have the technologies with transformers, you just embed every one of those events into your own, LLM, so to speak, and now you can just use a transformer to find all of the bad fraudsters. Now, this example might only be for my company, but there's no reason that you couldn't use embeddings to find fraud within insurance. Someone logs on. They have a very bad JA4 fingerprint. If you remember yesterday, that guy was challenging me on VPNs. You can get a JA4 fingerprint that tells you if someone's using a VPN via the packet size. But that JA4 fingerprint is not going to tell you what their VPN is. So I still challenge him, but you can identify if someone's using a VPN. You can identify the sequence of events that you think this person bought the policy yesterday using a shady website, using a shady email, and they're filing a claim today. So there are these techniques that you can use, if you choose to apply them, to more efficiently find fraud and do other things that we need to do within our role as actuaries.
Wow, thank you very much, Frank. So Frank is already talking about the use cases of artificial intelligence and in areas beyond insurance. Thank you very much, Frank, for bringing that perspective. Now, one of the issues that I see is that many actuaries have already started using, I think there's too much of echo. Does everybody else feel? Is it okay or there's too much of echo?
Actually, I think the panelists can hear a lot of echo, right?
Hello,
Maybe not the audience.
Okay. Hello.
Them it's okay.
Okay, all right. I'll continue. So many actuaries have already started using artificial intelligence in one way or the other in whatever work they do. Many of us are using the publicly available artificial intelligence platforms like OpenAI, Anthropic, and the others for generating reports from a given set of data and analysis. Now my question is to Dave. Dave, what potentially could be the problems from uploading this data and analysis, which is supposed to be confidential client data or my employer's data, on these public platforms, and what will you advise to actuaries about using these practices?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is, I don't know why, but I think a lot of people use AI models. They think about them differently than we just do our regular actuarial models. Like, if we just used our regular actuarial models, we would never just put that data somewhere else, right? We're in our life system and we're crunching stuff. We wouldn't just leave it out on our desk or anything like that. But for whatever reason, it's almost like we think AI models are like an extra Google search or whatever, right? So we have to be very mindful that, we serve the public, right? Insurance is very personal. You have to remember that each line item that we're dealing with in Excel is really somebody that had a health condition or somebody's family that had a life-altering event, right? You need to think about that responsibility to the public, and that information shouldn't get out. So one thing like we have done at our company is, we have established our own AI use policy, and we use our own, let's say, internal version of ChatGPT or, Copilot, something like that. And so that way we at least try to restrict what gets outside of those regular models. Because, you have, as an actuary, you have to make sure that you you keep everything confidential. So I don't know why we have that mindset. It's just like entering it into Google, but we have to think about it. It's just like our regular actuarial models. We would never share that with anybody.
Thank you very much, Dave. So Basically what I get, what I draw from you is that don't ever upload anything that belongs to somebody else on public platforms. Use your internal models, right? Okay, perfect. Or use these public platforms only for generic information or generic templates. Thank you very much. Paul, do you think you would like to add some perspective to this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. I mean, I completely agree about it. If you've got confidential information and you want to use an LLM, make sure it's an internal LLM and it's completely firewalled or separate from the internet, so the information doesn't get out there. But I mean, there are other issues as well. I mean, if you are using a public LLM, I think there's an increasing risk that the LLMs are going to get trained on information which has been generated by LLMs. So you might find there's a bit of a feedback loop there. So it's going to be interesting to see how these models do develop over time. But it's also important to recognize that, and this highlights a bigger issue, I think, which is when people say AI, what do they mean? So one part of AI is LLMs, but you've also got the machine learning side of AI as well. And there's a risk that some of these models, if you don't know exactly what they're doing, or even if you do think you know what they're doing, they might introduce some levels of bias that you wouldn't want to see if you had more control or visibility into what's going on. Which is another reason why I think it's really important that actuaries need to understand what these models are doing, the sensitivity to particular parameters, and also have ways of picking up if there is some, say, unintended gender bias or some other kind of subgroup which is being disadvantaged because of the way the data is being used in those machine learning models.
Interesting. So Paul is bringing about another perspective. Apart from breaching the confidentiality, you could be introducing an unintended bias in whatever you're trying to achieve by uploading your data on public LLMs. And he also brought about the difference between the artificial intelligence and machine learning models. Right? That's interesting. Now, and I'm hearing it for the second time that, you know, these are complicated models and actuaries have the responsibility. This question I will request Nalin to take. Nalin, very often actuaries are accused of being black box. Now, with the advent of these AI-based actuarial models with negligible or no actuarial involvement, do you see this as a risk of actuaries being perceived as bigger black box? Number one. And what are the other risks in this? And what's your advice to actuarial profession on these risks?
Great, thanks, Anurag. Look, I think the start here is about professional accountability. You know, as actuaries, we are trusted to give the advice that we give because we're basing our advice on solid foundations. AI will not create a divergence between actuaries that use AI and actuaries that don't use AI. Actually, there will be a divergence between actuaries that use them as tools to complement their own thinking, and then those actuaries that use it to outsource their thinking, to replace their own thinking. And I think that's something we need to be extremely cognizant of as we go about our days. We cannot be replaced, or we cannot replace our thinking by these tools. In terms of the black box, it's a little bit about what Dave was saying. My view is that actuaries are experts in working with black boxes. We have worked on our financial models since the beginning of actuarial science. There were generally very few actuaries that were strong enough to know what was actually going on in those black boxes. From the finance actuaries with our valuation models through to capital reserving models where only certain actuaries understood it, through to risk-neutral pricing, market-consistent values. We got narrower and narrower in terms of how many people actually knew what was going on. And I think actually, here we are. We're at another black box. And so how we apply what we already know is the solution here. We already know about model control. We know about model governance. We know about data validation. We know about results validation. We know about the importance of communicating our results. All of that professional accountability that we carry will allow us to overcome some of these risks that we worry about. I think another thought is about how we label our work. If, when we write reports, we are clear in which parts of the work we relied on AI models, partially or fully, and which parts we didn't, the users become also a lot more aware of what they're looking at and the quality of the output they're looking at.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nalin. I'll just toss this question to Frank. Frank, do you think, do you think there are effective ways to address the perception of actuaries being black box, which could potentially be magnified when actuaries start using, LLM models? How do you think we can become a little more transparent and reduce that perception of being black box?
This is a constant battle, right? I think actuaries need to learn how to communicate. What's very fortunate is here in India, I see a lot of actuaries being CEOs, right? Sunil, for example. And that means that actuaries here are able to communicate enough to get into higher levels. And you get there by explaining things to folks in a way that they can understand it. I think that we need to find a way to demystify some of the things that we do so people can trust it more, and to find ways of talking in the language of the people that we're working with. Gen AI can actually help coach on this too, because there's a lot of prompts that I have, one of which is, explain it to me like I'm 5, right? And I can put what I've put in there, and I said, all right, digest this, now explain it back to me like I'm 5. And it'll give me some actually really good ideas on how I can break things down more simply. But that really is it in a nutshell, is figuring out how to connect with our business partners that need our services in a way that they can understand what we're doing.
I love that, Frank. Frank is saying that while, we will start using artificial intelligence and models, use the same artificial intelligence platforms to translate things into easy, plain English language, which our stakeholders, which the people who are using our models can understand. Great, wonderful. That's the end of our first section. Now we move towards partnering by actuarial profession in India's journey to Viksit Bharat. And when we're talking about India's journey to Viksit Bharat, obviously I'll turn to our own President, Preeti Chandrashekhar. Preeti, what's your estimation of the demand for actuaries by 2047? I know it's a difficult question. You may not give the real numbers, but even if you want to hazard a guess, that'll be fine enough. There are 3 parts to a question. The second part is, what is IAI doing to ensure that the supply of actuary keeps up with the demand for actuaries in Viksit Bharat? And number 3, what will be your ask from the government of India or the powers that be to achieve these goals by IAI? Over to you, Preeti.
Wow, that's a lot of questions. Summing up perhaps the whole theme of the entire conference, right?
You have a tough,
Thank you.
job to do.
So, okay. So your first question was, what is your estimate of the demand for actuaries by 2047? I'll try to reword it slightly differently. And this is what we are aiming for. I don't think we're talking about qualified actuaries here. We are talking about the demand for actuarial skills, which could be traditional areas or it could be non-traditional areas. And I honestly don't want to hazard a guess, but just to give you a perspective, as I said, all future roles that we're talking about need not be statutory in nature. And of course, with insurance for all by 2047, the new insurance bill, 100% FDI in insurance, the requirement for actuaries in traditional roles will definitely increase, both in terms of expanse and the depth, right? So in terms of looking at innovative products, transparency, trust, and personalized service, I think the previous panel discussion, they talked about how important it is for you to innovate products and make sure that there's a right balance between pricing for affordability versus what you're looking at from a risk perspective for the insurance companies. And I think their actuaries will play a huge, huge role. So from a demand side, only on traditional side, I would think it will increase. How many fold is for us to see how innovative we are in terms of, showing value to all the stakeholders concerned. And so that's the first part. On the supply side, I would just say that, the focus for us is the 3 C's. One is catch them young. We are doing a lot to be able to introduce or make the younger generation aware of actuarial science in schools, colleges, etc. And we are doing a lot to reach out to them when they are in class 8 or 9, when that is the early years when there is there is an awareness that they need to have of other professions beyond the traditional ones that most children in India look for. So that's the first one. Second one is also we are doing a lot of tie-up and accreditation with some of the colleges where we just facilitate. I will not say we make it easier for them to write the actual exams. We just facilitate so that they have enough they have enough tools through which they are able to understand what actual science is all about. How is it that they want to go through the exams? We give a lot of support to them in terms of student awareness programs in colleges, and I'm not talking about schools here, I'm talking about colleges, accreditation for them. So that's the second one. The third one within that itself is we are recognizing that there are a lot of other strong professionals in India, and it is home to a lot of good premier institutions. So we are seeing how is it that we can encourage them to understand actual science, appreciate it, and perhaps take exams so that they are armed with actual skills. Here again, I'm not talking about qualified actuaries. So you have chartered accountants, you have company secretaries, you have other professionals who it's good for us if they understand, because they go back and become the brand ambassadors for our profession in other professions. So that sort of makes our job easier. The second C is continuous professional development. This is a very important area. I'm sure all of us, understand the importance of this area, where there are a lot of emerging aspects that we need to get trained on. There are a lot of emerging risks which we need to be aware of. So this is the second C, where we say that, okay, how is it that you can arm the members with more information, more training, so that they are able to become more and more relevant to the problems that we're talking about today. The third C is collaboration. Now this collaboration is not, is at different levels. There is the first level of collaboration within members of life, GI and pension. That is the first level of collaboration. The second level of collaboration is across actuarial professional bodies across the globe, and we've had conversations on the side with all of them. Some of them are due today, where we are seeing, okay, how is it that we can collaborate with them better so that we get a lot of learnings, global learnings to India. And the third collaboration is across, different professions. Yesterday we had a panel discussion with the ICI and ICSI. I'm really, really very gung-ho about, how we can take that forward. So this is what we are doing from our end, and from a government perspective, we request them to help us open doors with basis some of these conversations to some of the other emerging risks that, we are sort of the world and India is talking about. The other day I was doing a podcast when the person who's hosting it suddenly asked me, do you have an actuary in ISRO? He said, why not? And this just got me thinking that there are many other areas which are non-traditional of not level 1. It's not about banking, etc. that we're talking about. We're talking about totally different aspects, because wherever there is risk, you have to have an actuary. Right? We all love, we don't avoid risks, we just make sure that we understand the risk and model it better. So I think in a nutshell, this is what we are looking at IAI.
Thank you very much, Preeti. So that's a very assuring voice of the president of the IAI, that we are fully geared up to meet the increasing demand of actuaries for Viksit Bharat. Now, so while numbers is one, and the second area is, how do we step out? How do we move to wider areas? And we have two gentlemen sitting on either side of this panel, Frank and Nalin, who are already, you're doing a great job in very, very unconnected areas. One in Uber, nothing to do with insurance. One in a property management company, again, nothing to do with insurance. Insurance might be a small element of what he does. And so my question is to begin with to Nalin. Nalin, I know one area that you're working, so that we already know, but what are the areas in which actuaries have already been working in countries that you've experience of working in? And what are the new emerging areas beyond where actuaries are already present? Would you like to quickly talk about it? Because I would like to talk, get the views of a couple of other presidents as well on this. Yeah, Nalin, over to you.
Great, thanks, Anurag. I think we are privileged and lucky in South Africa in that our actuaries have grown up in a reasonably innovative culture. Some of that is historical because of some of the isolationist policies South Africa's adopted long ago, and so an innovation culture was something that was actually required. Our actuaries work in traditional areas, but have within the last 30 years branched out into investments, and so they are fully qualified investment actuaries working in all our fund management companies. We have enterprise risk management actuaries that work on capital projects in slightly wider areas as well. And more recently, again, through entrepreneurial outcomes, our banking industry has opened their doors to actuaries with very specific banking qualifications, and actuaries adding significant value within the banks, not just in terms of risk management. So we're very pleased with where we've sort of come to today. In terms of where we're going into the future, certainly we've created a culture where members who are feeling passionate about something need to grab it and drive it. And so as a result of that, we have extremely experienced members who have decided we need a non-executive director committee. And so a number of members are now working as that as a practice area. We've got slightly younger members who have decided an innovation committee is required to learn about design thinking and prototyping, etc. So we've got an innovation committee. We've got some actuaries working on AI and an AI committee. And so we try and create these facilitative structures where members can drive these strong agendas and then get other members into the communities as well.
Thank you very much, Nalin. That's very interesting. I mean, I'm sure that this gives a food for thought for a lot of youngsters sitting here as to the area that they can potentially move into, because South Africa is already doing that. Dave, would you quickly like to add to it as to what other areas have you seen actuaries working in, and what potential areas are emerging, let's say in next 1 decade or 2 decades, where you see actuaries working or coming to help?
Yeah, I'll speak to something close to my heart. I am a health actuary by day, and like a lot of health actuaries, I did a little bit of valuation at the start of my career and then got into pricing, very traditional stuff. But then I realized that, over the last few years, there's a lot of opportunities in healthcare analytics, right? So you can help the providers, you can look at access to healthcare. It's not just pricing the insurance side. You can then help analyze the outcomes, right? And then, so, because there's, at least in the US, there's a lot of distribution of risks now. Who's taking the risk? It's not just the insurance companies. So we are helping other people analyze those risks. Similarly, I never thought, 15, 20 years ago that I would be in the middle of political debates. In the US, I do quite a bit of health policy work, and it is very exciting, and it's a growing area. And so it's kind of interesting to see that between kind of the population health and the health policy side, there are way more opportunities in the US, and I could see that here as well, right? So it's not, you've got to think not just the insurer side, but who else is in that process along the way, right? There's the medical providers, they need assistance. There's the regulators that need assistance thinking through that, and the government officials as well. So don't just think about the end user and the insurance company. There's a lot of people along the way where you can help them assess kind of the financial risk of what they're doing.
Thank you very much, Dave. Bozenna, would you like to add something to it, please?
Yeah, sure. So in Australia, the situation's been a little bit different to here. We've had a big move 30 years ago from defined benefit to defined contribution, and then that freed up a lot of actuaries to go and work in other areas. Then we've also had consolidation in the industry, again, freeing up actuaries. So this has forced people to go and look to new areas for employment. So there has been a huge amount of innovation in Australia. There's very many companies were founded by actuaries working in data analytics, and they've been really successful across all industries, not just insurance. Then even in my own career, I've had the opportunity to work in areas, anywhere where you've got long-term cash flows and uncertainty, actuaries can add value. So for example, I worked in the gas and electricity industry when the markets in Australia were deregulating, and I worked for the generators and the retailers, and we had to price that market when you got a half-hour spot price in electricity and gas, and how are you going to price that market, and how are you going to set the contract terms and conditions. Now, there was no standard actuarial toolkit or things to use, but you just do things from first principles, and you think about the risks, and then you can give that advice and communicate the uncertainty around that. I've also done some work for the Sydney Futures Exchange, working out how much capital they need. I've worked for a teleco, I've worked for a vineyard company. I know another lady who's working out where the ambulance headquarters around the cities should be spread so that you can have the fastest response time to the individual hotspots. Actuaries can work in any area where there is the uncertainty and the modelling. And I just really encourage you to don't be constrained to the insurance industry or to what you know, but to have a go and to go into these different areas and apply your skills, think about it from first principles, and I know you'll be able to do it too.
Thank you, Bozenna. Paul, would like to add to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the insurance industry and similar industries are going to continue to be really important, because governments around the world are seeing that if you want to have an economy with good growth, you have to have resilience across your industries, and the resilience that insurance provides. And the range of industries which are going to use insurance is going to grow, so there's always going to be those jobs for actuaries in insurance. And similarly, when we look at retirement and the resilience there that you can have from using actuarial principles to design retirement products, work with retirement systems, that's always going to be really important. But I do get a little nervous about conversations where we're trying to say, look at jobs that actuaries could do or where actuaries could add value, because very few people, very few employers will be looking at a problem and think, you know, what I really need is an actuary. What they'll do is they say, I've got a problem, and what they need is someone who can solve it. Now, the people that can solve it are often going to be actuaries, because it's going to be actuarial skills, but they're not. But the employers aren't looking for actuaries; they're looking for problem solvers. And I think if you look at the areas which we'd now regard as being commonplace actuarial areas, like general insurance. I mean, there wasn't a general insurance exam in the UK until about 40 years ago. Now it is one of our key areas. If you go back to the 18th century, Equitable Life, founded in the UK, it was the first company which actually had the role of actuary in it. And therefore, you know, it didn't succeed because it had actuaries. It succeeded because they worked out a way of providing life insurance products and converting the cost into a regular premium using what we now know as actuarial techniques. And they succeeded because all the other companies either did the same thing or they went bust. So it just showed that using actuarial techniques was successful, even though they weren't called actuarial techniques then. So I think what we need to focus on is, where are there problems where actuarial techniques could help? Let's go and solve those problems from a grassroots level, not by saying you need an actuary, but by saying, yeah, I can solve your problem. That's how we spread to new areas in the past. I think that's how we'll continue to spread to new areas in the future.
It's a great idea. Thank you very much. I'll talk about it a little later. Frank, over to you. Last word.
Yeah, okay. I'll start with Dave's response. I really love when actuaries get involved in public policy, because you're sure to get a good result. And so if I had advice, I would say we need to find ways to talk more with our regulators so they can understand like an actuarial balanced view. I actually like what everyone else said. There's so many different ways that actuaries can help. One I want to double click on, and something I think Paul mentioned, is within insurance. Even within insurance companies, actuaries can solve more problems. I'll give you an example. If you are staffing claims adjusters or a call center, when you have too many, you overpay. When you have too few, your customers are angry. But actuaries can just build a triangle, right? We know exactly when the claims get reported. We just organize it. adjust for seasonality, adjust for growth, and we'll say, next week you need 20 adjusters. The following week you need 21 claim adjusters. You know, how many people do you need in the call center? We can solve that question. We can get it down to a science where we know down to the percent how much additional you have to pay for a claim that you respond to late. If you don't respond to a claim within 24 hours, every single percent is going to cost you both on the severity as well as on future retention for customers. Actuaries can calculate this stuff, and they are absolutely critical things to know if you're running an insurance company. So there are many roles outside of insurance, but even within insurance, I think we need to try to find ways to add actuarial discipline and thinking.
Thank you very much. That was a great discussion. And a couple of takeaways that I get from this topic is that it's open to your imagination where you want to work. Wherever there is a problem, and if you think you can solve it, you can go and solve that problem. Just don't talk about being an actuary, just talk about being a problem solver. And you are perhaps best equipped to be problem solvers with your ability at large data management, with your structured thinking, and the training you get as an actuary. It's not that we're talking about actuaries moving to other industries. We are talking about we as professionals moving to different industries, whatever you can imagine, wherever there's a problem, wherever there's a data, perhaps you can go and solve the problem. Thank you very much. Moving to the next section on actuaries and ethics, I will quote a recent happening, and that is the resignation by the head of AI safety of Anthropic. And he raised a couple of questions in his resignation letter. And he said, the world is in peril, not just from artificial intelligence, but from a whole series of interconnected crises. And then he talked about concerns over the industry's psychophancy, that is not speaking up when the head of AI safety should have spoken up, or people who are given responsibility to speak up, not to speak up. Second, he said that he's going to devote his time to the practice of courageous speech. And the third, he said, is we appear to be approaching a threshold where our wisdom must grow in equal measure to our capacity to affect the world, lest we face the consequences. He raised some very, very interesting observations, very, very interesting issues. And when I was reading it, I said, wow, these are so very relevant to our profession as well. May I request Paul to take this question and look at these aspects and how do you interpret these issues, or what perspective you draw for us as a profession of actuaries? How do we look at that, and how do we avoid that our profession does not face these issues anytime in future?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all boils down to professionalism in the very broadest sense. So part of the challenge there is, are you doing the right thing? Which is really what professionalism is, in terms of accusations of things like sycophancy and not really answering the underlying, the true question. I mean, that's what professionalism really is. So we do need to do that. But I think also there's something around actuarial training, or the training I had anyway, which even goes back to some of the exams. I mean, the first half of the exams, it always felt like what you had to do was try and work out what the answer was. And then for the second half of the exams, you had to try to work out what the question was. And when he's talking about wisdom there, it just makes me think about the experienced actuaries I know are very good at taking a big step back and saying, okay, I know what we're being asked to do, but what's really important here? What problem are we really trying to solve? What's the big picture? What are all of the, and this almost links into enterprise risk management. What is the environment in which this question is being asked? What is the bigger picture here? Which is an aspect of professionalism, actuarial professionalism. So I think it's an area where we are able, certainly at a senior level, to give that kind of oversight, that kind of professional commitment, and that kind of ability to stand back. I think one of the challenges which I do think we can meet, is to pass on those skills to the next generation. I suspect it's something which many actuaries have struggled with in the past. They've thought, you know, how are we going to build actuaries that are able to think the same way as us when they no longer have to do their calculations with a slide rule and using square paper? You know, they can just do it using a spreadsheet now. Yeah, well, somehow we've managed. And I think with the new techniques that actuaries are using, and as have we heard, I mean, they give us opportunities to learn better. But we need to make sure we can still get across this ability to work out what the question is, to stand back and see what really is important and what other external factors we need to take into account, and make sure the next generation of actuaries also has those skills.
Thank you very much. I mean, this is something which is very, very relevant for our profession, to be aware of the issues that this could create. And, you know, this has rocked the entire technology industry with the kind of, you know, issues that this gentleman has used in his resignation letter. Anybody else would like to add?
I'm dying to jump in. Okay, sorry.
Yes, Frank, please.
So how many of you know this one? How many of you know the answer to this question? Who is the hot dog eating tech journalist? Raise your hand if you've heard of this. Okay, go into Google, Gemini, or OpenAI, your favorite AI tool right now, and ask it to tell you who is the hot dog eating tech journalist. And the reason I bring that up is it's completely fake. And hopefully the AI tool that you use will tell you that it was fake. This tech journalist created a fake web page about him being a hot dog eating champion in a fictitious hot dog eating competition, complete with fake journalists reporting on it. And he got that website to be ingested by all the AI engines out there. And therefore, when you ask about him or ask about hot dog eating tech journalists, his name comes up right up. So hopefully you tried that and you see this work immediately. Why am I saying this? I think there is a very important part of actuaries speaking up, which we talked about this. There's a responsibility, but there's also responsibilities for actuaries to stay in the know about what is happening. What are the risks? We are in the business of risk. And so if we're going to use a tool, we're going to have to understand the safety parameters, the things that make it unsafe, and be able to opine on those and speak on those professionally. So that is one duty that we do take on as actuaries. And hopefully that hot dog guy can keep that front of mind.
Thank you very much, Frank.
Anurag,
Thank you very much. That's a great.
Can I jump in?
Yeah,
I kind of
please,
want to
please.
tie a couple of those points together. The way I look at it, if you guys in your career are never in an uncomfortable position, one, it's going to be a very boring job, and two, you've probably done something wrong, all right? And to tie it to Frank's point is you need to be prepared for that situation, all right? We have the actuarial standards, you know, be proactive with it. That's what professionalism is about, right? It is to be prepared for those situations where you are in those uncomfortable spots.
Thank you very much, Dave. And a very interesting question, and I would love to, you know, continue to discuss this, but I'm looking at the clock, and we have very little time left. But I would like to, you know, a round of applause. I mean, every time I sit with Frank, and there are certain issues, I can really see a person, you know, clearly the kind of passion that builds in within Frank, and you could see the passion that he, you know, he wanted to take this question. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating in this very, very interactive discussion. I'll now like to open. Anybody would like to add a perspective before I open the house for questions? Yeah? Anybody? Okay. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, delegates, questions. Okay, please. Will somebody help with the mic, please? Is there anybody helping with the mic, please? Request you to state your name and.
Hato Patel, Standard Life from the UK. You talked about a lot of the hard skills. You know, actuaries are seen as risk experts. But as leaders, I'd be very much interested in your views in terms of some of the softer skills. You know, what do you see as the image of actuaries today, and where would you like it to be?
Are you addressing it to any particular panelist?
No.
Who would like
across the leadership
maybe
group?
Maybe I can take it from an India perspective. I think extremely important today minus AI and tomorrow with AI and AI plus plus is actually looking at data storytelling and communication. I think there's nothing called over communication, and I know from when at least I started my actuarial exams to where we have sort of progressed leaps and bounds. But when we are talking about solutions for the common man, when we are talking about talking to more policymakers who would be non-actuaries, we are talking about coming up with solutions for the common man to be made understood by the common man. I think data analysis and storytelling and communication is extremely important. That's one. The second one is collaboration and broaden our horizon. I think when we are talking about getting into newer areas or emerging areas, I think collaboration is a given. We have to broaden our horizon and go with a growth mindset, right? It's not that day one I start something, come Monday morning I'll see it a huge success and my name will be splashed across everywhere. That doesn't happen. You have to have a growth mindset, which means you have to lean into failure, recognize that there could be some ups and downs. And what happens is when we are senior actuaries in senior positions, that's something that most of us have forgotten, you know. We've learned that resilience while we've done the exams, but somewhere in the process we just have forgotten it. I think that's something that we need to remind ourselves about.
Thank you very much, Preeti. Nalin, would you like to take it?
Yeah,
Okay.
if I can maybe just quickly add to that. I was actually going to say something very similar, but I was going to summarize a little bit in the sense of, I think as actuaries, we worry about IQ. And we spent our entire careers worrying about IQ. As we've worked, we've realized EQ is important. And all of us get out there and we are able to communicate. And as we can see from the socializing going on at this convention, I mean, we're really good at EQ. To Preeti's point, CQ is the next version. And you can call it collaboration quotient, cultural quotient. There are words you can put around the C, but effectively it speaks to this cross-cultural collaboration, resilience. It's us being able to solve more complex problems. And that is the evolution of our profession. That is the next set of skills that we're going to have to find ways of inculcating in our members.
Yeah, Dev.
Yeah, I'll go back to the word I used earlier, uncomfortable. I think I try to get a lot of my staff into slightly uncomfortable situations, right? Like I may have a team call with a client and they're on the call, I will have them present, right? They're not just sitting, listening in, taking notes and doing the follow-up. I try to get them involved along the way. And I think that's one thing a lot of people don't do is they don't practice those things. As a consultant, I try to get a lot of my staff to speak at meetings and things like that. And maybe you baby step it. As I always joke, I always have them speak at like accounting conferences first. So if they screw up, no one knows the difference, right? It's not another actuary, glaring at them. So I think practice is a thing that a lot of people are hesitant to do, but we have to kind of combine that being uncomfortable, but keep working at it.
Thank you. We have time only for one more question. So,
Hello, myself, Preeti. It was interesting to hear actuaries working in the public policy domain. So my question is that how actuaries, if they really want to, from the starting of their career, or maybe some years afterwards, directly through administrative or publicly elected roles can play a role in public policy or shaping governments?
is it addressed to any particular panelist?
Or anyone?
Yeah.
I mean, one thing they can do is join working parties. So in the IFoA, we do quite a lot of consultation responses and end up working with government and advising government on particular issues. I think what's helpful working in public policy is, my own view would be not to start working in public policy, but to get some experience of the broader industry and the environment first, so you can then apply that to the public policy questions. But in areas such as the pensions gap, so particular groups who are underserved by retirement provision in the UK, we've done quite a bit of work there. There's various aspects of the insurance industry where we regularly contribute. We contributed through the Actuarial Association of Europe in the European policy on Solvency II. So the kind of working groups are a really key way to get into that. And then once you get into that and you talk to the people who are actually involved in it full time, their day job, because I mean that's another key skill, I think, if you want to develop your career, is networking. Talking to people, getting out there, having conversations, finding out what the opportunities are. And you know, some of my students at Heriot Watt in Dubai, I got them some free tickets to a conference, and they just network like mad there. I mean, half of them got internships for next summer from the conversations they had there. That's a really good skill to have.
Thank you, thank you. Nalin, you wanted to bring a perspective?
Yeah, maybe just quick. So South Africa has appointed a public policy actuary that is a member of the staff. And this particular individual is interested in driving research related to public policy, but also advocacy and stakeholder engagement. Part of this, though, is the strategy that the society has around it. And so we have been thinking about our public interest strategy and actually what do we want to engage the government on. And really it's about getting those hot topics. As I was sitting in the crowd here and watching the presentations this morning about resilience and sort of the 2027, making sure the entire population is able to be resilient, 2047, I mean, all of that is actually public policy work if you think about it. For South Africa, our education system is something we need to spend a lot of time on, and actuaries can get involved. So it's just an example of prioritization.
Just a quick point, just kind of logistically what you should look for like a law change, right? That's how I got into it. In the US, there was a big law change, and I instantly thought, oh, they need an actuary to assess what's going on with that. So any rule change, any guidance change, hop on that immediately, and you can be a voice to get into that policy discussion.
Thank you very much, thank you. I would have loved to continue this interaction, but I'm bound by the time. It's only 12 seconds left to me. So I would like to wrap up the discussion. Thank you very much, all the presidents who are on dais, and thank you very much for being a very patient audience and asking questions. And those who still have some questions may catch these panelists on the sidelines and discuss as long as both of you can afford. Thank you very much. Have a great time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you